Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Steve Brown, CEO of Orcadian Energy. Welcome back, Steve. How are you doing?
Not so bad, Phil.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah,
we had a decent bit of weather, but it's gone a bit grim now. How's things with you?
Yes, cold, not that warm, having to burn gas, breaking the bank.
Which isn't cheap at the moment, is it? That's for sure.
Yeah, gas price is something else, isn't it?
It is
just crazy.
So today we saw the announcement of the Phase A Extension and Resource Update, RNS. So first question I've got after sort of reading through, it's quite a lengthy RNS, is what exactly are these phases that you allude to? And also I saw a mention of to enable license P2320 to proceed into Phase C. Could you talk to the listeners or explain to listeners exactly what these phases are?
Yeah, sure. So the North Sea licensing system had an overhaul in the sort of 2019 period or whatever. It's always had initial terms and then second terms and then third terms. And third term is for production. The second term is what you're in once you've made a discovery or drilled a well, and that's used for development planning. Our P2244 license is in that phase. And then the initial term is basically for exploration. But what the Oil and Gas Authority, as it was then, it's now the North Sea Transition Authority, did is they split that into three phases. So phase A was just for studies. Phase B was to go and shoot seismic if you needed to. And then phase C was to drill a well. And, people know these as driller drop licenses. We got P2320 and we've been working on studies since then. And to move into phase C, we didn't propose a phase B in our license. We'd have to commit to drilling a well. And that basically means we'd have to raise the money to drill the well now if we wanted to do that. And we don't want to do that now. We want to do that at the same time or around the time that we've actually got a pilot project moving forward. So we asked the North Sea Transition Authority for an extension to phase A. And to be honest, they've been much more stringent about allowing these extensions. We really had to make a very good case for getting the extra period, but they understood why it was important to us to keep the license and to have that possibility of drilling, say, a bowhead exploration well, or there's a multiple options. We have a Cara exploration well in the coming year. That's wrong. We've got another year to make the decision, right? And to raise the money. So that fits then with our fundraising for the pilot project.
So basically, this extension allows you to continue with the development of that project effectively.
Absolutely. And, that this license is a bit intertwined with the pilot development because there's a discovery on it called Few, which has a gas cap. And we're going to use that gas cap to inject gas into when we've got too much gas and to draw gas from when we haven't got enough gas. So that helps us minimize the emissions from the pilot development, and that's really important to the NSTA.
Yeah, and the other part of the RNS was regarding the reprocessing of the seismic data, which enabled you to increase the oil in place as a resource update. Do you want to give us a bit more background on that?
So when we listed, we licensed a couple of 100 square kilometers of data from TGS. It was pretty new data, but more importantly, it had been newly reprocessed. And what does that mean? It had been reprocessed to focus on the Tay sands that are the reservoir that we have. And it's a bit like, turning the focus on your camera. Rather than focusing on the deep, they were focusing on the shallower horizons. So it was a much better data set than what we'd had previously. And we've been working with our consultants to do a new interpretation. We've reinterpreted Bowhead. We've had a look at Blakeney. We've had a look at Few. And importantly, we've had a really good look at the pilot field, which of course is the core asset. And when we did that, we realized that the part of the field that we were planning to develop, so we call it the development area Actually, in the CPR, it's called the reserves area. Just if people want to reference back to that, we could see an increase in the oil in place there of about 10 to 15%. And we expect that whenever we take that to Sproul, our reserve auditors, which we plan to do later this year, that'll feed through into the reserve number. There's more elements involved in that, and it's a complicated story, but we're optimistic that we'll see an uplift in reserves and whenever we publish that report.
What are the current oil in place reserves?
Right. So you have oil in place and you have reserves, and they're different things. Oil in place is, unsurprisingly, the oil you have in place. Right? Reserves is the oil you're going to be able to get out.
Recoverable.
So that's what's recoverable. And the way that Sproul allocated reserves was actually based on looking at the oil in place, then saying, where are you going to put your wells? Which bit of this reservoir are you actually going to drain? And we have 263 million barrels of oil in place in total on pilot, according to the Sproul report. And they saw the development area oil in place as being about 205. And it's that, then they multiplied that by roughly 40% to get exactly 40% to get a technical recoverable volume. And then they trim the tail off that to get the economic recoverable volume. And then that's your 2P reserve. So what's happened is that developed area oil in place has gone up 10 to 15%. And we expect that to feed through into an improvement in reserves. But we're also doing actually a lot of reservoir modeling based on some new polymer core flood work we've done. That's looking very encouraging. And it'll be the combination of those two things that result in a new reserve estimate that we're hoping to do probably 3 months after we commission the CPR with Sproul, which we'll be doing in a little while.
So recoverable oil barrels in place is what, about 72 million or something?
Recoverable is 78.8 million barrels. I always say 79. And that's the figure that, we're hoping to see an uplift in, actually more than hoping, expecting. And also our proven reserve is 58 million barrels. Proven reserve is really critical to financing a project because that's what the bankers look at. The people who are going to lend you money or advance money in a bond or whatever, they're focused on proven numbers.
Define proven for us then. What does it mean? Does it mean, I'm going to stick a hole down there and I'm certain of getting this amount of oil?
There's nothing certain in the oil and gas business. So whenever you've got a discovery and you've got it well appraised and you've got a lot of data points around it, which we have, we've got 7 wells in this reservoir. We've got fantastic 3D surveys. We've got a very good handle on what's actually there. You build a probabilistic view of how much you're going to get out. And what typically happens is that the P50 case becomes your equivalent to the 2P. So that's proven plus probable. The volume you're 90% certain of getting out is your proven case. And your P10 case, that's your 3P case. Not always exactly those numbers. Some reserve auditors take slightly different approaches, but that's a good way to think about it.
And just for our listeners, what does P2 mean? What does P10 mean? What does P50 mean?
Right. Okay. So the phrase is 2P, and that stands for proven plus probable. 1P is proven, and 3P is proven plus probable plus possible, but it's a tongue twister, and I can't get it out.
PPP, so it's like 3 times P effectively.
Yes, it is.
It's 3P.
And then P90, which is kind of...
Don't tell me that's 90 Ps. Steve,
no, it's not 90
that would be too much.
90%. 90%.
No, it's not. You're 90% certain of getting more than that number out. And then your P50 is, well, half the time it's a bit less and half the time it's a bit more. And then your P10 is It's only 10% of the time you're above that. That's
Brilliant. This is oil and gas like 101 lesson, isn't it? I mean,
this is what we want. This is what we want.
It's really important because it feeds through into value. The most important thing for value is whether or not things are resources or reserves.
So your 2p value, right, which we're now saying is proven and probable, is how much?
So that's 78.8 million barrels.
Okay, and if on today's oil price we conservatively gave you $5 a barrel, how much would that be?
That's roughly 80 times 5, so that's 400 million.
Okay,
dollars.
So this is what you probable plus, I forget
proven.
The P's now.
Proven plus probable.
Proven probable. Yeah. And then what is your 3P then? Proven, probable, and possible.
So the 3P is 111 at the moment.
Okay, so we've a discrepancy there of 33 million barrels is possible.
Call it an upside. And so that's possible that you can get to that. But for me, the most important thing about our assets are that they're reserves, and you only get to be called reserves if you have a mature development plan that you're capable of executing and the reserve auditor thinks you can raise finance for. And unless you meet those criteria, there's actually 7 criteria, you don't get to be reserves. Contingent resources are called contingent for a reason. There's something that has to be done to transform them into reserves. So, maybe it's an appraisal well, maybe it's putting the development plan together, whatever. And prospective resources are, the gleam in the geologist's eye, and maybe they'll come in and maybe they won't.
When I was reading through the RNS, I looked at the another number. There's a Bowhead prospect remaining, obviously a very exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
And then there was a geological chance of success that was touted to be increased to about 65%. Now, from my reckoning and previous sort of information I've seen on other oil and gas exploration companies, it was always around the 30-40%. There was never really a well that had a bigger chance than sort of 30 to 40%. Is there a difference between a geological chance of success and a kind of, let's call it, an engineering chance of success?
No, that's a very good question. What we're quoting there is the geological chance of success. So that's the chance that we'll drill the well and we'll find hydrocarbons within the reservoir. It doesn't speak about the development chance of success, which, it depends on how big it is, what the rocks are like, are they high permeability, what the oil's like, so on and so forth.
Sure.
So that is just geological chance of success. I would say for Bowhead, we've got a very high development chance of success because we're expecting high quality rocks. We're expecting an oil pretty similar to the one that we're planning to develop and pilot. And we'd be piggybacking on the pilot development. So the chances of putting an economic development plan together are pretty high. But there's also a second question you had, which is kind of why is the geological chance of success up at 65%? And the main reason is that in this area where you have amplitude brights in the Tay sands, every well that's been drilled on 3D with those amplitude brights has found oil. So that allows you to adjust the chance of success to take that into account. I mean, it's a complicated process. You have to look at, is there a seal? Is there a source? What's the quality of the rocks? There's a whole set of criteria you use to come up with the geological chance of success. But then you've got to look at the track record around you. And the track record is, if there's an amplitude bright and you put a hole in the ground, you find oil in this region.
Sure. Thanks for that explanation.
So it's not to say it's guaranteed, because every time you put a hole in the ground, you get a surprise.
Steve Brown, CEO of Orcadian Energy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.